Hey Hollywood Hills fans, and welcome to another show. If you can believe it, this is episode number 39 of the season. Just shows how busy we've been and how busy you guys have been out there as well. Remember, the beginning of the season was EWXCs, GXCCs, Farm Jams, and now we're getting close to the sharp end of the championship. GXCCs have just got 2 rounds to go and Farm Jam have just got 1 round to go. So we are coming into the money time of the championship where we really start to see who is going to be walking away with things. We'll talk about all those things going forward in just a moment. This week's show is going to be a double header. We've got a race review and a technical insert. We'll start things out with the final review of the GXCCs from Delmas. This is the chance of the support classes. These are the OR 1, 2, and 3 in the Pro-Ams and the WOW class as well. This is for you guys. Enjoy. For the GXCC support class, Delmas was going to be an intense race. Remember, by the time the support guys went out, all the pros and age group categories had gone, and including the national guys. It was going to be a huge Dust Bowl race for these guys, and an important one as well. After this, there'd just be 2 rounds left on the championship tally to try and decide who would be our brand new champions, and there would guaranteed be a new champion across each of our Pro-Ams. This was an important one. On the OR1 Pro-Am Big Bangers, both of our championship contenders had major problems. The Rooster going down in flames off the gate, and he was our championship points leader as well. It was going to be a story of seeing if, how, and when he would be able to make the comeback. He was now going to have to go through the traffic, the first time he's had to ask that of himself throughout this championship tour. On the 2s, it was all about Burrell. Burrell once again saw clear air. He got a good position off the lock, but he did also make a huge mistake. But it wasn't as big as the Rooster. He tucked the front end a little bit coming out of the hole shot number 2, and then was able to recover enough to still bust out clear air and run and hide. In the 3s, it was anyone's game at this stage of the proceedings. Everyone trying to just get their numbers on the page. This, out of all the Pro-Am categories, is the most difficult one to decide. No breakout runaway winners as yet at this stage of the season. The ladies going out combined with the pros, but in the Pro-Am category, it's all been about Shady Krobler. She is the lady to beat, looking for a perfect season at the first time of asking. She had a modest gait and was actually able to run out not far off the back wheel of the top pro ladies. But she was definitely faster than the rest of the Pro-Ams. And then the WOW class gave us a huge entry, just over 15 riders and a lot of new blood. 1 or 2 repeat riders as well, as we saw Teak Harrower get the 250 Smoker hooked up nicely. He's looking to move up into one of the pro categories for next year. And after riding for a couple of seasons on an ancient CR 250 Smoker, to see this guy move up into a 4-stroke, it's just going to tell us what he is actually capable of. All riders were going out into the 50-kilometer main loop. The terrain out at Delmas, a lovely mixture of high speed, a little bit of slow tech stuff down by the rivers, and that would just give riders a little bit more chance to slow their roll and calm things down a little bit. For the WOW class, inside the top 5, always cool to see some new blood, different names and different faces climbing the ladder. Tace Stewart got himself up there as one of the top Yamaha riders. Henk van der Merwe on the KTM, having a good run of things as well. And most of the WOW class guys did manage to tag a 2-lap racing format. It was tough racing for them as well though. Teak Harrower, even though he is on one of the older machines out there, still had some impressive lap times. He was good enough in the tech. He lost a little bit of speed in the high-speed runs, but 3rd place was a nice finish for him. Benru Stratum on the Husqvarna smashed and splashed his way all the way to a number 2 spot, one of the highest ever placings he's had at a GXCC event, and he definitely ran the numbers. Fraser Cooper for KTM came out of absolutely nowhere, his first ever GXCC event that was combined with the Nationals. He was out here supporting with the KTM boys, decided to swing a leg, and would you believe it? Fraser walks away with his first ever GXCC win at the first time of asking, coming out of nowhere and taking the checkers at the first time of asking. Congrats, Coop. Welcome to the podium. Just 3 ladies scoring finishes at this round of the GXCCs. Danelle Delport suffering in some of the tech zones, but on the flatland stuff, she was good enough to tag a finish, walking away with 3rd place, and important for points come the end of the season. Remember, for Danelle, this is her first full season of racing on the GXCCs, or any format of motorcycle racing. Shelley Tyler battled and smashed her way through into a number 2 spot. Remember, she got picked up at the halfway mark of the season, running out of the 2-4 Projects squad, and she is paying them back in twofold as well. 2nd place is potentially going to see her able to challenge for a 2nd place in the championship. But this season and the find of this category is all about Shady Grobler. An incredible curve sees her improve at every single round of the championship. She's got a very solid approach on the bike, a nice shape coming out of the riding style as well. And Shady Grobler out of the CIT Franchise Co squad is looking on point to be able to dominate with just 2 rounds to go after this. She is a runaway champion off this gate. And as is the case, if you win that gate, you are a pro for next season. Confirmation then of Shady Grobler taking the win ahead of Tyler and Delport, and Coop ahead of Straydon and Harrower out in the WOW class. We move forward now into the Pro-Am gates, starting out with the OR3s. Squeaking at top 5 this time around, Renier van Heerden got himself up there. Renier's been in and out of the championship for the last couple of rounds. We saw him as a breakout rider at the beginning of 2020, and he seems to be finding his form once again. A number 5 spot here in the Dust Bowl that was Delmas. He was locked in a dice in the early stages with Francois Swart. Swart eventually making the pass and getting himself 1 position higher on the road. Also, battled with some of the technical terrain. We did find some of the smaller riders had to just smash their way through the rocks and hope for the best. Swart definitely took that approach, and a 4th place was his reward. Out of Middelburg and the Vans Husqvarna racer Bernie Besadenhout gelling nicely now with that 254 stroke. After so many seasons of racing on the Smoker, it was time to step up, and I think next year we may see him challenge up into the pro categories. Bernie in a number 3, up the road from him, a sparring partner who has been jumping around on categories and different kinds of bikes for the last couple of years, starting out on Yammies, switching across to the KTMs. Andre Barwise in good form once again into a number 2 spot, but this category has all but been smashed to pieces by Janus Janssen. Janssen getting the moves going and starting to look like a possible champion with just a couple of rounds to go. Janssen off this gate on the C108. The dude to beat. Janssen then confirmation ahead of Barwise, Besadenhout and Swart, with Van Heerden beating out on Kotze, Jordan. Thorn Blake was down there in a number 8 ahead of Duplessis, but Stefan Smit on the Yamaha, 10th place, his lowest finish to date. One of our championship hopefuls as well. Into the OR2 Pro-Ams, where we started to see eye-watering speeds coming out the guys that predominantly were running out there on 354-stroke machines. Butter Hennings was there, trying to stay ahead of Stoffelberger. These guys run very, very, very similar pace as well. So it was bar banging the whole way through the early part of the event. Remember, they had to go out there for 4 big laps of the event. Most of the riders able to tag a full 3-lap racing format, with 1 or 2 breaking out into the full format. It was difficult conditions for everyone to try and manage. Extremely hot weather and dusty to boot. Fueling and hydration were key. Dieter de Vet, the tall, rangy rider coming out of the EMD QCon Racing Squad, loves this kind of terrain, loves it wide open, flat out, so he was enjoying the high-speed nature of certain parts of the track and just surviving through some of the tech. Dieter de Vet walking away with a 3 spot. Vernon Nordier battled with some of the high-speed sections. He is running out there on the 300 Smoker, so he was top end of the revs on the lowland stuff, but in the tech, this is where he's able to make up a lot of time. So the river crossings and the slowest sections of the track very much played into his wheelhouse. At the top of the pile, though, it's Brad Burrell. He looks like a breakout star. The second half of the GXCC Championship to this round has been all about Burrell getting off the front, able to run the perfect racing format, pulls the pin, gets the whole shot, runs clear air, and it looks like he is a champion-elect as we roll forward into the final 2 rounds. Verena has been put on the calendar for the penultimate round with a very top-secret venue hosting us in the first week of December for the final. Burrell then on top, beating out on Nordea. Watch out for that dice in the championship with just 2 rounds to go. It's heating up. De Vet there ahead of Berger, Hennings and Young, with Godrich, Van Gool, Elaine de Toy down there in the number 9, beating out on Jeff Kruger, putting the car away for a weekend and getting on the bony. Our final category for the Pro-Ams, the big bangers, the OR1s, where it's all to fight for in the championship. Breaking a top 5 this time around, Rohan Tablanche takes one of his highest ever GXCC finishes. No doubt benefiting from a lot of the championship contenders going down in a blaze of glory off the gate, and Tablanche able to break out, stay ahead of the dust, and a lot of the rest of the competitors. For Jaco Smith, a rider able to turn his skills to absolutely anything. Some of the more technical nature of the track was no problem for him at all. He's got a sweet setup on the machine. He just lost a little bit of time towards the end of the race in some of the high-speed runs where the bike was running a little bit too hot. 3rd place and one of our top runners now starting to climb the ladder. Timmy Dreyer looking much more comfortable than we've seen him in previous events. Dreyer going to be a new threat going forward into next season's championship. Looks like he's got a perfect setup on his machine, and the 136 KTM climbs all the way up to a number 3 ride on one of the hardest tracks that we have raced to date. For the Rooster, Rudy Vieira had to really dig deep and figure out what is in his back pocket. He's had a good run of form up until this round, but going down in flames off the start line, breaking his clutch, and then having to tough it all the way through the dust and the terrain. But the 2nd place will be decisive in the championship. Dwayne Clausen also bogged down off the line, and incredibly enough, himself and the Rooster came all the way through the traffic together, but the advantage was Clausen. At one point, in fact, the Rooster did have his nose ahead, but after those clutch issues, Dwayne Clausen dropped the hammer, and the big dude on the C620 smashed his way to the top of the pile. It's been a long time since we've seen Clausen on the tippy top.
Rooster, I thought I'd change it up. I'm sick of talking to all the pros. I want to talk to the Pro-Ams, man.
Yeah, what a race. It was tough as nails out there. I got caught up on that first corner, went down, bent my clutch. So it made the rocky technical stuff really difficult. You know, the 500 loves to flame out. So you got to keep it revving the whole time. But on the open stuff, if you got clean air, just hang on the cable and the thing just wants more and more and more. It's so good.
I bet you didn't feel too out of place against the national guys because you've got a good flow out there.
Well, yeah, look, I mean, all things considered, our class in general, there's some good oaks in there. There's a lot of talent. So they keep you on your toes. I mean, you know, you can't sit back for 1 second and be like, oh, look, I want to take a breather now, you know.
Listen, there's 2 more rounds to go, but I'm counting your chickens before you even hatch them. But it's getting close to the championship. What's the thoughts of moving up pro next year?
Well, I mean, I did the GOC, the Pro-Am Championship in 2015, 16 when Lawrence took over. And so, yeah, no, it's about time to move up to pro. So I'm keen. I'm really keen. Looking forward to it.
Confirmation, Clausen on top. This is going to be an interesting story. Vieira, an important 2nd place for him, beating out Andrea, Smith and Tablanche, with Nienaber, Van der Vestes and Campbell, Shokos and Van der Merwe rounding out the top 10. The OR1 Pro-Ams. Interesting, with 2 rounds to go. So that wraps things up with all our review shows done coming out of the Delmas round of the GXCCs. We'll get ourselves ready to go forward into the penultimate round of the championship. That is going to be right at the end of October. Verena confirmed as our venue. Watch the press as we go forward with more details of the next event. For now, GXCC Delmas wrapped up in a bow. So that's Delmas and the GXCC's round number 5 of their 7-round championship tied up tight in a bow. Watch out for the press as well. We're going to be going out to the new race venue of Verena with Vian and the GXCC management and all the guys out there who are working already on that farm to make things lacquer for the end of the month. Remember, that's going to be the 30th of October. That is going to be their 6th round, their penultimate round of the championship. We should be opening up entries in the next week or so as well, but we'll go out with Hollywood Hills and Livex and give you guys a little bit of a taster, a little bit of a teaser of how things are looking out there on the farm just around the corner from Witbank. So we said this was going to be a double header. We have obviously been partnering up for the last 6 months or so with Justin from CW Suspension. Cycle Works once again giving you some nuggets of absolute gold. Get those notepads out, guys. It's coming at you. Justy, we're back in the CW workshop. It's very cool. Now we've gone through the customer experience, we've gone through the SAG setup, we did the intro video, and then you and I came up with the next concept. And it's something that's kind of to do with suspension, but more to do with the bike setup. What have you got for us?
Yeah, mate. All good, man. Yes, one of the biggest problems we find in the suspension world is actually installing the fork or the suspension correctly. So our job is to set it up and service it and repair it and do all that. But your job as the customer is to install it correctly. We can't always install the fork properly. So we have a thing we call front wheel alignment. Front wheel alignment with the forks is very, very important. It's actually one of the important points in your owner's manual. So the important part about front wheel alignment is aligning the floating axle up to the fork. So you have an anchor point, which is on the brake side caliper. All those bolts you can, when you've put the axle in, you can physically tighten that side up and torque it up and it'll be fine. You must always leave the right hand side loose, which is the floating side axle. That axle actually allows the right hand fork to float and move itself to the right position. If you don't do this, the fork tends to get tight and hard, because if you push the axle in from left to right, you're actually forcing the right hand leg in. So what actually internally happens is when you run through the stroke, the forks actually bite on the bushes and the fork progressively feels harder. Sometimes can get stuck. So front wheel alignment is very detrimental to fork installation. Making sure the fork is installed correctly, front wheel is aligned up properly, that'll help you get the proper feel of the fork and the fork to move freely through its stroke.
That's what happens when you put the fork in initially, or the sliders in initially. But what about when you crash out there on the trails? Do these things sometimes come about as a cause of a crash and things like that?
No. Front wheel alignment, it doesn't come from a crash. From a crash or something, or you hit a tree or you fall, sometimes you have the forks twisting in the triple clamp. And that's a quick fix. You know what I mean? You put the bike on the stand, you loosen up the triple clamp bolts, and the forks will tend to, they would move themselves or realign themselves by themselves, and you just retorque them again. But front wheel alignment is a fork installation process that you need to follow. The front floating axle needs to be in line with the fork to move freely properly. Well, first thing what we'd like to do is you've obviously got your front wheel in. You've got the front wheel in. You've slipped the axle in. So hence the axles come from left to right if you're standing in front of the bike. First thing we do is we slip the axle in totally, so it's all loosen up. We would first put the bolt in, side bolt in. We would tighten it up. So our rule is that we try and get to all customers is you always tighten up the anchor side first, which is the full anchor side is on brake caliper. So brake caliper side is you can actually tighten everything up, you nip it up. You can tighten the pinch bolts up on the pinch bolt side. Keep in mind that you haven't done anything to the non-brake side. So everything is still loose there. So everything is tightened up on the brake side. The floating axle on the side is still loose. So it allows the left hand, the right hand fork to do its job and line itself up. The one option is to have the bike on the stand, and you can actually spin the wheel and lock the front brake, allowing the front axle on floating side to line itself up the fork on the floating axle. Then you can tighten the pinch bolts to required OEM specs. The other option is you can take the bike off the stand and while the bolts are still loose, and pull the front brake in, pump the bike suspension up and down, allowing the floating axle to line itself up, then tightening the axle bolts again, allowing the front axle to float and get where it needs to get and line itself up, allowing the fork to move properly and correctly without binding into bushes and having, which can cause premature seal wear and bush wear and even forks to lock up. So this is a very, very important process. It's a very, very important process of installation, making the fork work correctly, and it's something that you should do every single time you've taken your front wheel off, even to change a mousse, to change a tyre, change spokes, or do anything. Every time you take the front wheel off, you need to align the forks, which is very important.
So that is our Hollywood show wrapped up for today. Next week, we're getting ourselves ready to go forward into a new one. We're going to be out this coming weekend filming with the MCA Husqvarna Racing Squad. That is going to be the Brawler, Ian Roll, and Maddie Wilson. We'll get up close and personal, talk about their partnership with MCA, also with how the season has been going on the GXCCs and the Nationals. So watch out for that one. There's still plenty of Hollywood to come, guys. Stay tuned.